Hello there and welcome to the latest edition of the DF Direct Q&A show. Lots to get through. I'm not going to waste your time. I'm just going to introduce the panel. Hello, John Linneman.
Hey, Rich. How's it going? I'm back.
Good. De-bearded.
Yes, de-bearded for reasons, but it'll come back.
Good. Also joining me, Oliver McKenzie. Hello.
Yes, happy to join you, Rich, at this kind of inauspicious time for console gaming. Not the happiest of news, but I'm happy to be on the panel.
Here at Digital Foundry, we have a massive number of devices connected to the internet at any given time. Testing all this hardware means we need to take network security seriously, which is where today's sponsor, Surfshark, comes in. A major benefit of Surfshark is that you only need one account to secure an unlimited number of devices. It's a straightforward, practical solution for an entire household or a busy testing studio. Whether you are securely downloading game patches on public Wi-Fi or checking regional digital storefronts to find better deals, Surfshark's network of over 4,500 servers in over 100 locations handles it all easily. They also include a feature called Clean Web, which blocks ads, trackers and malware, so you can browse safely. You can try out the service risk-free with their 30-day money-back guarantee. Go to surfshark.com/digitalfoundry or use code digitalfoundry at checkout to get 4 extra months of Surfshark VPN. Check the video description below for more details. Arriving just after we taped the last edition of DF Direct Weekly was the news that Sony has increased prices across the board on the PlayStation 5. Quite remarkable when you look at some of the price rises across time. PlayStation 5 Digital Edition launched in the US at $399. Today, its price is $599. The Disc Edition launched at $500. Today, it's $649. The PlayStation 5 Professional, that launched in 2024 at $699. Now it's $899, which is like quite astonishing. Big ramifications here for the affordability of gaming, I'd say. But at the same time, obviously, it is just the fact that the economic outlook, as the PlayStation blog would have it, isn't looking great, particularly with the rising prices to memory and storage. And I guess, at least they didn't increase prices sooner. But obviously this has prompted questions from our supporters. Marcus asks, "Hiya, Foundryman!" Exclamation points. The PS5 and the PS5 Pro just got a big price increase. You've already talked about the cross-generational period likely becoming much longer this time around. Do you think this should change the way we buy consoles or PC hardware in any way? With the consoles, it seems like buying early is probably a good idea. With PC hardware, are there any particular considerations one should be making, planning for this longer cross-generation winter? Are there some specifications you think are more or less important? Hope you have a great week. Wow, that is a big question. Cross-gen is going to be quite lengthy. We already knew that from various sources. But man, the pricing as it is, you've got to wonder what these new consoles are going to cost. Maybe things will have calmed down a little bit by the time they actually come out. But this is not great. John, what do you think about all of this? I mean, the concept, first of all, of buying early, I am actually a proponent of buying early, and I realise that not everybody can do that, right? Because not everybody's got the available funds at any point. But I'm just thinking back to pretty much every product launch, maybe with the exception of Switch 2, where, basically there's either been a scarcity causing problems, or, basically, as is the case here, prices have just generally gone up. What do you think about that?
Man, buying early is a difficult thing in the console space traditionally, but I think it has improved. If you recall, Rich, in the past, buying early essentially meant that you were buying borderline prototype hardware. Not actually, but usually first-generation consoles were most likely to fail.
Yeah.
Right? Especially with PlayStation. PlayStation 1, 2, and 3, all those first-generation units were garbage in terms of longevity. They can be salvaged, but if you owned them in the first year or even the first 2 years, you were often met with major issues. So that wasn't great. And that's why most people, if you waited, you would get not only a cheaper unit, but you get one that was more reliable. I feel like with the PS4 generation, they actually somewhat turned this around, and PS4s in general have been pretty robust. So, PS Vita as well, I would argue, is pretty robust. So, like, since then, hardware has improved, and the PS5 as well. There are definitely some issues. I know there's been people that have had liquid metal issues and overheating and other things with early systems, but it seems like that can also hit later generation models as well. And there hasn't been any sort of like major reworkings of the hardware in a way that makes first generation consoles bad. So it did kind of flip the script a little bit, right? If you bought a launch PS5, you're probably still okay with it. My launch PS5 still works great. So in this case, yeah, where we're at now, it's starting to look like maybe buying early isn't such a bad thing, but that in itself gets to the heart of what's happened this generation, and it's the first time we've ever seen this, where the console model was built on this. You have early adopters that essentially become proponents of your platform. They're excited. They buy it at the highest price. Over time, more games ship for it. The consoles, if they become more popular, the sales increase. And also the console hardware manufacturing becomes cheaper. And as a result, they're able to lower the price, which then lowers the sort of like entry point, and more users buy in. That's traditionally how it's always worked. And that's what has allowed the sort of like numbers to go up as much as they have. This is the first generation where we've actually had the opposite. And all of this seems to be external to the consoles themselves. They were built for a world that no longer exists. The rise of AI and data centers has essentially destroyed like home consumer electronics in terms of what companies can realistically offer at competitive price points. And nobody was ready for it, I would say. And as a result, these machines were not built in a way that allowed them to either reduce prices or even continue to sell those original prices, like Microsoft. So they kind of saw part of this coming. You remember when we visited Microsoft in Redmond, they told us about the Xbox Series XS situation and how they felt that they couldn't really cost reduce or upgrade significantly in the coming years. And that's why they decided to do that 2 SKU release at launch.
Yeah.
And they were right. But what they didn't suggest or predict was that cost of components would actually increase significantly, making those launch prices no longer viable. And that's what's happened. And I think this sucks a lot. This is really, really bad. It's not just Sony, Microsoft, Nintendo, it's everything. All consumer electronics are seeing this major hit to this. RAM prices, storage prices, everything is out of control right now. And it's so bad that I actually think we're in danger of the entire gaming industry really buckling under this. Like when you couple in all the layoff stuff and just the amount of like economic chaos happening in the world right now, like in our little happy corner of games, things are not good. People cannot easily afford these machines anymore. The fact that the most successful current generation console on the market is largely unaffordable to a huge number of people, unless you're willing to go used, is extremely disturbing. And it sort of changes like the game on this. It changes what's even possible. And software prices are going up as well. And at the same time, at a point when these types of games are struggling to survive, the types of games that at least I want, we have like the increasing success of all these forever games, which are often free to play. So even with low end or older hardware, you can still get in and play. And a lot of people are doing just that, which means there's even less people interested in tackling the newest games on the newest consoles because they can't afford it. And they're happy enough with what they have. And so it's just, it's leading into a situation that we've never been in before with game consoles. That's extremely worrisome, I would say. And Marcus here then asked about PC hardware. And again, this is like a weird point with PC hardware. I mean, we've definitely had scarcity in the PC space before, but it hasn't been quite like this, where GPU prices are just out of control. RAM prices out of control. Building your own PC now sucks. It's not what it used to be. Like, it felt like we were going into a direction where PCs were poised to become just one of the most popular places to play, and still could be, but it's now becoming more and more difficult for that as well. Like, everything is just more expensive, and it's bad for games, is where I would land right now.
Okay. What do you think, Oliver?
Well, I think in terms of this person's question, I think buying early is always a good idea. Like, I've always felt like when I have been in early on console generations that it's been a good thing, or at least has been recently. With the 360 and PS3 generation, that did not end super well for a lot of consumers, myself included. My 360 red ringed 4 years into that generation, but I feel like recent hardware launches have been very reliable. And I think if you were in on like a PS6 in 2027, assuming it launches in 2027, I think that'll be a good value, and I think that'll carry you through a lot of years of gaming, like many, many years of gaming. But if you have the opportunity, buying a PS5 Pro right now isn't a bad idea. Indeed, it's sold out pretty much everywhere in Canada that I can see. Obviously, the recent PSSR update, I think, changes the value proposition significantly with PS5 Pro. And I feel like that console will be good for a while here. In terms of the PC question, I think memory is one factor where PCs are not always keeping up with consoles. Obviously, we've seen that with the proliferation of 8 gigabyte GPUs. But PCs are so far beyond consoles in terms of ray tracing performance and so far beyond consoles in terms of CPU performance. There isn't really a definite problem there, I would say, with the specs relative to like a PS5, which I expect will be the baseline for games going into the 2030s. I mean, I'm not expecting there to be a radical change in the specifications that developers are targeting. I just expect that at the bottom of the market, there will be like, PS5s, handhelds, to some extent Switch 2. At the top of the market, you're going to have high-end PCs. Somewhere in the middle, you're going to have PS6. And the kind of gap between those consoles, like the visual gap between those consoles, will be negotiated by new rendering techniques and by ray tracing, is my expectation. So I think you're going to be able to work with that hardware for a very long time to come, is my expectation, if you buy in at the moment, or even if you buy in a few years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm just trying to unpack this question. Buying early. I mean, obviously we need hardware here. I don't take it for granted that we'll be given it. So I pre-order, whenever pre-orders open for like new consoles and stuff. And I always end up with consoles. That's the bottom line. It does kind of work less less easy on the PC side of things, because it doesn't seem that you can like pre-order a 5080 or a 5090. You kind of have to wait until it drops, and then it's a big question mark as to whether it will be available, and the question is how much it will cost if it is. That's something I think the PC market really does need to address. In terms of like the PC that you kind of want to buy, or for the cross-generation period, I just think current hardware is actually very, very good. Just just don't get an 8 gigabyte GPU is the bottom line. And I do think that a lot of the features that you're going to be seeing in next generation consoles, you're kind of getting a preview of them now with RTX 50 series. Frame generation, multi-frame generation, ray tracing, path tracing, 5070 upwards sort of buys you into that sort of stuff typically. Obviously, it varies on a game-by-game difference. In terms of this concept of console prices rising over time, it's fair to say this isn't the first PS5 price rise. There were PS5 price rises before the memory crunch happened and before the storage crunch happened. So it kind of illustrates the point that Microsoft were making way back in 2020, which is that we can't cost reduce consoles anymore. And that was worrying, right?
And that was part of the pandemic situation as well, right?
Well, when they saw us, we didn't really know what the implications.
No. Their point was accurate, but I'm saying those original price raises were part of that, right?
Right.
We already saw major issues as a result of the pandemic, and then we have this on top of it. And so, yes, they were rather salient with their points. It's almost like they knew.
I think the other thing is, I think there is maybe a misconception of sorts about the way console pricing works. Is that obviously there is the concept that Microsoft, Sony subsidizes the boxes so they become cheaper, and they kind of claw back the money over time via software sales, where typically they get 30% of the revenue there. The issue with that is that actually it's the concept of them subsidizing the box. It's not supposed to be for the entirety of the generation. They do expect price cuts to happen with their bill of materials, and therefore they kind of break even and maybe even make a profit. That's what's not happened this time around. I think they were talking in that interview, John, that typically they could see benefits, cost price cuts to storage, but they were also saying they're also expected to provide more storage. So that kind of balances out, but that didn't really happen anyway this generation. So yes, to a certain extent, they could see it coming.
Interestingly, the original Xbox had issues with price reduction. It was the one Xbox where that was a problem. And that's one of the reasons they killed it off after 4 years.
Yeah.
Was they were not able to really price reduce it enough to make that viable long term. So,
yeah, I mean, just going back to Marcus's question on the PC side of things, yes, there are sort of, you can look for deals. There are still some deals. I mean, I was over the weekend.
that's true.
Over the weekend, I saw that in the UK you could buy a 5070 for like pretty close to MSRP. I just had a quick look at Newegg, and it's about $100 over MSRP there. But yeah,
how much is the MSRP again on that?
$550 for 5070, and they're like $649 minimum there on Newegg. Yeah, but they were like, quite cheap in the UK, relatively speaking. I do note that the 5070 Ti is still available, contrary to what was circulating a month or two back, but it is expensive. Again, in the UK, we seem to be much better insulated against this kind of price rises that are happening there. But even so, yeah, it's not great. I mean, the concept of a console, a basic console, the basic PS5 digital edition being $600, it's mind-bending. It's not great. I'm just actually going to take a look at the increase to the PS5 Pro in Europe, which is always high. Yeah, it's like €900 now. It's nuts.
Dude, it's so high right now. Man, this is ridiculous.
All right. Let's move on. Question here for Anxiously Chronoed Figured. Hey, DF Crew, with RAM and storage prices going crazy right now, is it still realistic to build a decent gaming PC for the price of a PS5 Pro? Was the PS5 Pro actually good value in terms of today's market? Cheers. A decent gaming PC, well, define that. That's the question, right?
Actually, Rich, there's an interesting video on this from our good friend Mark Triforce Duddleson from My Life in Gaming, where he recently, he's done for the first part of his series, he specifically set himself a goal of building a PC that was around PS5 Pro, slightly faster, and trying to keep it at $1,000 US dollars. The one caveat it turned out is like, and he admitted it, because of the RAM crisis not being factored in, somebody was able to provide him with RAM. So he basically shaved off a bunch of money there. So it didn't end up being exactly as he wanted, but he built a really nice PC in that range and installed Bazite on it. And I was impressed with the results. It looked great. It runs great. It's a good machine. It's just, yeah, because of the RAM situation,
yeah,
you pretty to basically get to where he was, but add in the RAM cost on top of it, you would need to probably sacrifice maybe like one level of GPU, right? Like take it down a notch, or find, I don't know. It seems difficult to like really match the PS5 Pro price while keeping it at that, like even at $899, which is high, like getting that level of performance on a PC is still not super simple, but it's almost possible, it seems. I don't know about you guys.
Oliver.
Yeah, I'm looking at Mark's build right now. It does seem broadly equivalent to a PS5 Pro. It's got a 9060 XT 16 gigabyte, a 7600X 3D processor. That's going to do you pretty well, I would say, relative to a PS5 Pro. The big discount is obviously he got 32 gigabytes of RAM for free, seemingly, or for a shawarma price, which is, not quite accurate. And the other thing I would say is that the SSD, it's a 2 terabyte SSD, but he only paid $140 for it. Nowadays, that would be more like $250, $220, something in that range, American dollars. So I think if you were to build this today, I mean, he built it like a month or two ago, I think it'd be a lot more expensive. And then I was looking through pre-builts on Amazon, and it was like for a 5060 16 gigabyte system, a 5060 Ti 16 gigabyte system, they're regularly coming in at like 1400 USD, something in that range. So I actually don't think it's a very realistic target to expect to, be equal with PS5 Pro or better on every single spec for a similar amount of money, unless you're going with used, or unless you're getting 32 gigabytes of RAM for virtually nothing for a shawarma. That seems unrealistic to me. But yeah, I mean, ultimately though, I think with PS5 Pro and PS5 and consoles in general, I mean, it just depends the kind of experience you want. Like if you want the PC experience, I feel like you should go for a PC. If you want a console experience, you should go for a console. they aren't really very interoperable at the moment, those two kinds of experiences. But if you are buying on price, I mean, you're always going to get a discount, virtually always get a discount on the consoles for hardware. You might end up paying more over the long term for software and for services as well.
I think there's a number of sort of mitigating factors here. First of all, you can't run your existing PlayStation 5 library on a PC. So, you know, to many users, the concept of being able to swap between, you know, your PS4 or PS5 for a PC is not quite as clear cut as people seem to think it is. You know, what happens to your existing library? You're not able to use those games anymore. The other thing, of course, is that the price of a PS5 Pro or indeed a PS5 doesn't really factor in the fact that you do kind of have to have a subscription to access the games properly and do multiplayer and stuff like that. Cloud saves. I mean, what kind of nutty world is it where you have to pay to have cloud saves? So,
I mean, Rich, though, I would argue none of those are actually necessary, though.
Right, but you know they've got a massive amount of the installed base that are using them, so clearly the audience thinks it is. So you know you have to factor that into the price versus your PC, where you don't really need a subscription. You know, you even get free games courtesy of Tim Sweeney without a subscription. So there's, you know, the whole pricing thing is very difficult. I think it would be quite difficult to build a PS5 Pro equivalent at similar prices, even if it's like $800 or $900. But at the same time, maybe you'd get money back from not having subscriptions. The RAM side of things is still going to be tricky. It's quite funny that, you know, you could actually probably get by with 16 gigs of DDR5 rather than 32, which is the sort of standard kit size now. But it's very difficult to actually get those 16 gigabyte kits, the 2x8 gig module kits. It's really tricky. Yeah, I mean, the other thing, of course, is that if you are on PC, then, you know, you can stay on PC and your library persists forever on there, which is a good thing. You can upgrade, which you can't really do with a PS5 Pro unless you want to, you know, just replace the whole unit. Yeah, I'd say you can't build a decent gaming PC for the price of a PS5 Pro that's equivalent to the PS5 Pro performance. You're going to need to spend a lot more.
One thing I would say, Rich, that what about, and this is perhaps not super future looking, but if you build a PC around, say, like a 12900K CPU like I had in the past, you can get a board that supports DDR4 RAM, which is a lot cheaper. And if you pair that with a powerful GPU, you still have something that's a lot more powerful than a PS5 Pro, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, there are options with DDR4 based systems, and you know even like cheaper chips like 12400F are still really good, judged by today's standards. Yeah, that's interesting.
It's looking like in Germany, at least around $200 will get you 32 gigs of DDR4.
Right. Okay. So it is a bit cheaper than a lot cheaper rather than
yeah, it's a lot cheaper.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of don't want to get sucked into these, you know, because that was the thing when PS5 Pro first happened and it was quite expensive. Everybody suddenly came up with their prospective builds that would deliver Pro style performance. And, you know, it still makes me feel a bit uneasy. Yes, you can do it, right? Or not do it, you know, or you can do it factoring in the subscriber prices, or you can do it via used prices. There's a lot of different ways that you can do the comparison, but ultimately I still think a console is a console and a PC is a PC. And maybe that sort of situation won't be quite so black and white going forward, but I do think that's the situation as it is now. But man, an $800 gaming PC, or rather a $900 gaming PC, I'm not sure it'll get you pro performance. Anyway, let's move on. Got this question here from Dajako in brackets Dan. Happy half fortnight, gents! ! With two major sources corroborating a full-blown remake in block capitals of The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. What would you like to see achieved technically that would make sense given the Switch 2 hardware and the state of Zelda engine technologies while retaining the charm and spirit of the original masterpiece? How could they use or advance Tears of the Kingdom's heavily customized Havoc physics? Will we get the 64DD content? Will we finally get a playable light temple with RT beam puzzles? Will they boost the frame rate by 50% or more to 30 FPS or beyond? Will we finally see DLSS in a Nintendo game? And surely they'll take a remake of this pedigree in-house rather than giving it to Gresso. John, a lot of questions there.
a lot of questions. So man, the first question with doing a remake of this is what does it look like artistically? And I would actually like to see them develop something that's a slightly newer, different take on the Zelda visual design. You've seen the young Link model and a lot of Nintendo stuff over the years, and I really don't like the way it looks. I don't think just transplanting that original style into modern engine is going to work. So, but I also don't think they should just adopt the Breath of the Wild style either. That doesn't really fit. So I leave it to their artists to hopefully come up with something interesting and beautiful that actually feels authentic.
Right.
And isn't just a like one-to-one remake like the 3DS game. I would actually like to see them sort of expand it a bit. As to whether that would include the Havoc physics, I'm not sure that's necessary, given that the focus of the game is so unrelated to any of that. I mean, if they wanted to add some fun things to it, sure, why not? But I don't think that's crucial to it. And then thinking about 64 DD content, I mean, I doubt that's a factor here, but maybe, who knows? Like, Nintendo sometimes goes down weird paths with this stuff. I do think the frame rate will be higher, at least 30 FPS, maybe 60. I don't think it's going to have ray tracing, so I don't think that is going to factor into the light temple. DLSS, who the heck knows? And as for who's doing it, again, it's hard to say, but Nintendo's really not above handing these things off to partners to develop either, right? So it very well could be another studio like Grezzo or someone else. It's hard to say, but I mean, this is such a weird thing because I feel like this game has been around, such a known thing for so long. It just, I'm not that excited by the prospect of a remake, but I hope that they can do something at least interesting with it that feels moderately fresh. So I'm not opposed to it.
Okay.
So we'll see.
Oliver, what's your take?
Well, I think it'd be kind of fun to have a Nintendo hire this man version of the game, so to speak. Something with good PBR, baked lighting, kind of like a Metroid Prime Remastered. Although, I mean, I wouldn't slander that with the term Nintendo hire this man, but obviously, lavishing what is a relatively constrained game with great assets and great visuals, I think that could do a wonder for this title. Obviously, DLSS would be part of that. Ray tracing, I suspect, probably wouldn't be, especially because you look at this title and it is quite constrained in terms of the environments it's trying to depict. It does not need some like dramatic RTGI solution to look good. And would there even be a budget for that kind of thing, especially at 60 FPS, which I would hope it would target? I doubt it very much. But I kind of tend to think actually that Nintendo, they really like their visual remakes. Typically when they go back and they take a look at older titles. So you look at like Link's Awakening, Super Mario RPG, obviously the aforementioned Metroid Prime Remastered, Mario vs. Donkey Kong, I think that was last year or the year before that. They really do like going back to their older titles and not really remake too much of the gameplay, not really redesign the encounters, not really change any major puzzles, anything like that, or at least to the extent they do, it's relatively minor. They tend to go back and oftentimes in collaboration with external studios, remake the visuals completely for a new audience. So that's what I would expect them to do here, especially if they're working with an external studio. I don't think this would be like the kind of effort that would be involved in reinterpreting Ocarina of Time for a modern audience in a credible way and completely redoing its gameplay systems the way that this person is describing. I think that would be outside of the typical remit of Nintendo on these kinds of projects.
Okay. Interesting points. I don't really have too much to add to this because I've never really played the original game to any great length. So, I just have no...
Yeah, you were not an N64 fan, were you, Rich?
No, not really, no. It's just no valuable input whatsoever, to be honest with you. But John, do you think this remake is going to happen?
It feels like something that would happen.
Okay, good.
I really have no idea one way or the other, but it definitely, hearing things going around, it seems credible enough. It does feel like something they might try. Especially since they're probably brainstorming whatever they want to do next with Zelda. And I'm sure they realize they can't just do another Breath of the Wild style game again. So whatever comes next is going to have to be also rather fresh, and that's going to take time.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes sense to release new, previously existing Zelda games in new forms as they've done in the past. So, yeah.
Okay, good stuff. Let's move on. This question comes from Darth Repep. This was a Sidious apprentice I was previously unaware of. Greetings, distinguished foundrymen. PC players have long dealt with the frustration of shader compilation stutter, an issue that console platforms have largely managed to avoid. Completely managed to avoid, if we're being completely honest. With the emergence of the Project Helix hybrid console concept, could this kind of unified architecture become a gateway to finally reducing or even eliminating shader compilation stutter on the PC platform? I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts on whether developments like this could influence the future of PC game optimization. Excellent content as always. I'll quickly tackle this one, but basically, the issue with shader compilation is that basically there's so many different types of GPU out there and so many different types of GPU even within the same family. They each need to have compiled shader code for pretty much every single GPU that's out there. The thing with a console is it's a fixed platform, so they can just compile one set of shaders for the console. It's job done. So Project Helix, assuming that there is going to still be like a console partition, or maybe even not, it is a fixed platform, and so developers can still bundle the shaders with the game there. They just download them. There's no shader compilation stutter. However, that is not going to apply to the PC side of things, because unless you are using literally a Helix-like device as a PC. However, there are many different sort of things that are happening. Obviously, Microsoft has advanced shader delivery, which is looking to mitigate this problem, first of all, for a select range of PCs, and then I suspect the ultimate solution is for all PCs. And Intel have got their own spin-off of that they seem to be using as a kind of, how can I describe it, a fallback strategy, if you like, in case the Microsoft one doesn't work. So, they've only got a very limited range of GPUs on the ARC side, so they can actually quite easily deploy that. Far more difficult for someone like AMD or NVIDIA, where there's literally hundreds of different GPUs out in circulation at the moment, each of which would require individual shaders. So Helix isn't going to really be changing anything from that regard, because, assuming the console side is still a console as such, it will get the pre-packaged shaders, whereas a PC won't. Have I missed anything there, Oliver? I don't think so.
No, I don't think so. In general, I would expect them to possibly have a solution, like you mentioned, for the Project Helix console, but that wouldn't apply necessarily to the PC side of the Project Helix operation, or indeed other PCs that would be offered as gaming PCs for users. I also don't think advanced shader delivery scales that well across a huge variety of titles and configurations. I think we're yet to see that. So going forward, I could see a solution for Project Helix, but I think Microsoft is going to be mired in the muck of shader compilation issues for a while to come.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, anything to add, John?
Oh, not really. It is kind of what it is, right? Because of the multitude of hardware on the PC, like nothing like this is just going to come along and solve the issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
The only reason that Valve has kind of quote unquote solved this with their PC adjacent Steam Deck is that it's all one piece of hardware.
Right.
Right.
But there is fossilized, isn't there, Oliver? That's separate and distinct, right?
Yeah, fossilized, and the fossilized is a big deal, obviously. And they also pre-distribute shaders. But yeah, fossilized is a game changer. Fossilized is kind of like Microsoft's advanced shader delivery, but just running locally on your machine. And it tends to work very well, I find. So it is a good solution.
Okay, cool. Let's move on. We've got a couple of questions here, adjacent to one another. Jats Cracker games mostly love AMD's 3D V-Cache. Can you walk through the way consoles should or shouldn't include it? To me, it seems like a no-brainer to include it, as it will help CPU longevity. Just look at what the 5800X3D has become. Seems that a CPU's limitation becomes a limiter more quickly than a GPU's in each console generation. Expanding, wouldn't this CPU limitation be exacerbated now that ML-based upscalers are first-party console citizens? I think the main issue with 3D V-caches and inclusion in a console is mainly the fact that it's very expensive, right? You're basically adding a big slab of extra memory to the CPU, And the only reason it's there is because developers are kind of like not working within the cache hierarchy that's available to them already. And I think that best practice from, recommendations from Microsoft, Sony, or whoever would basically be try to, accommodate the caches that you've got, as opposed to requiring us to spend what across the course of a whole generation probably amount to hundreds of millions of dollars in silicon fab. I don't think that's probably the best route forward. Consoles are all about the sort of best bang for the buck. And I still view 3D Vcache as a kind of luxury extra on the PC space that people buy because they can afford it. That's not really the consideration of a console. Any thoughts there, Oliver?
Yeah, it's a luxury feature for high-end PC gaming, in my opinion, for high frame rates, for advanced titles. Increasing performance by like 20% by avoiding cache misses is not really worth it when you consider how expensive the silicon is and how constrained some of these fabs are in producing it. Like, I don't think it could... I'm not sure that it could scale to the kind of scale that consoles need. Like, maybe they can produce, single-digit millions of them per year, maybe. But scaling it up to 10 million, 15 million, 20 million units a year, I don't think the kind of packaging is there at these fabs to support that kind of effort. So I think it's kind of a non-starter, like completely a non-starter, even for like a pro variant of a console. It's not a non-starter if you want to spend $2,000 on a PC, but I don't think it's going to ever fit into a commodity console. And I don't think it makes a lot of sense for a commodity console, because developers tend to just, like for the most part on PS5, they target the CPU hardware they have, and they do a pretty good job of hitting 60 FPS within the limits of that CPU hardware by and large. So I don't think there's a major need for a vastly expanded processor in the next generation consoles, at least beyond what kind of low-end PC CPUs would offer.
Okay, John?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the big problem here is issues with cost and overall yield, especially when you're trying to like hit a certain price point with consoles already increasing in costs. This just feels like a difficult, dangerous road to go down. In addition, I mean, the sort of like 3D stacking also kind of adds like there's like a thermal component to this to consider, right? Where this is going to make everything run hotter, especially in an APU sort of like situation that makes like keeping thermals in check and predictable while keeping the box size as low as possible also possibly difficult. So like just those things alone seem like kind of like a non-starter. So I just don't think they could produce enough of this at the cost that they need to have it be as, get the yields in check and keep all the thermals down, all within like a magic box that costs like less than $1,000.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. So, we're talking about less than $1,000 at this point.
I know, it's just saying that is insane, and that's why that's why I don't think this could possibly work at this point. This is just, given where we are at now, this doesn't seem like something that they could go down to, and it's going to remain sort of in the PC realm. Although, I mean, I guess there are some improvements coming to it, right? There's like the bottom mounted cache design stuff that's being done. There could be ways to improve efficiency and overall cooling, especially for APUs, but I don't know. I don't see this being part of the console spec anytime soon. And if anything, I mean, I've kind of been wondering about, I mean, my Helix for sure, I guess, is going to remain x86, right?
Yeah.
I would imagine. But Nintendo's had a lot of luck with the ARM stuff on Switch. I feel like an Apple Silicon as well has moved in that, like, it's very efficient, and I just feel like ARM might be an interesting approach for Sony in the future, but again, it's given their current trajectory, that all seems unlikely as well, but still, I don't know, we'll see.
Okay, adjacent to that, we have this question from Orca Call. Good day, gentle crew. Jack Hewin just posted on Twitter officially confirming the Ryzen 9 9950X 3D2. Exciting stuff! ! Coming with 16 cores and a crap ton of cache. I'm super curious.
Crap ton.
Yeah, that's a technical measure. I'm super curious how it will match against Intel's new Core Ultra Plus chips. This will be a benchmark battle to remember. Yeah, I mean, I didn't think they would go through with a 9950X 3D2 because X3D is basically a kind of like mostly definitely sort of boosting game performance, and there's not really any gain to have it on more than one chiplet. So yeah, very interested that they've done this, but I did notice that they're actually targeting like prosumer style apps for this kind of thing, and stuff like Unreal Engine compilation times, that sort of thing. I think it would probably handily outperform the Core Ultra Plus chips, but at the same time, the new Core Ultra Plus chips top out at like $300, and this one's probably going to be significantly more expensive than that. Yeah, curious to see what that's going to actually come out as, but I've got no real urge within me to actually upgrade that from my 9950 X3D. But very curious to see how the reviews pan out for that. Let's move on to the final question.
Rich, don't you want 3D Now to make a return, though?
3D Now, yeah. MMX for the win. Okay, let's move on. Some guy person asks, and this is our final question. Rich, you don't need to speak about this topic on the show if you feel it's not the right venue to do so. Man, that's ominous. That's a way to start a question, isn't it? Okay, then we'll just go. The question is this. With Alex's output limited and a glut of potential PC coverage now on the horizon, do you think you'll take a team approach to covering some of these titles? I could imagine that Will and Rich could do some hardware comparisons. John and Oliver could potentially do visual comparisons, shader cache info and optimized settings, potentially in tandem with other people doing contract work, while Tom focuses on console coverage that the rest of the team would otherwise have done. Replacing Alex with one person isn't really feasible, but replacing Alex with the entire team working together might work. On a related note, Rich, do you have any potential contingency plans if Alex or anyone else needs to take some extended time off? It might be more likely than not that scenario would transpire relatively soon.
Jeez.
I do love this sort of doom mongering. It's pretty awesome. I guess it just sort of indicates that people out there kind of care, which I think is a good thing. Like they're worried. Let me try and put some of these worries to rest. Basically, there is one Alex Battaglia, right? And obviously there is a sort of overlap of skills. So, for example, I did the Crimson Desert optimization video last week. I think I handled that okay, but ultimately that was a video where the optimized settings were already generated by Rayan, our contributor, which would have been the case whether Alex was here or not. So the idea is basically that, and it's something we may need to deploy for more members of staff as the situation changes. But, the idea is certainly with Alex in reduced capacity at the moment, that we deploy him where he absolutely needs to be deployed. And then, we bring in other people to help reduce the burden. So, yeah, we've got Rayan doing optimized settings. On the previous optimized settings video that we did, Resident Evil Requiem, Corey from My Life in Gaming and the DF Retro Super Show actually did the edit for that. So, yeah, that's basically something that we're looking into. It's basically about improving the pipeline, so to speak. And the good thing about improving the pipeline is that, it can potentially help everybody in the team. Corey knows what he's doing. So, we can potentially hand off stuff to Corey to do while we move on to a new project, for example. So, yeah, I mean, things are improving. It's been a poor year for gaming, but from a Digital Foundry perspective, we're doing okay. And so we can bring in more people, we can do more content. And that's kind of what we've been doing. The last, certainly compared to January and February, our output raised dramatically in March. And it's all sustainable. That's the thing there. If anybody else needs to take extended time, or if people need to take time off, for example, extended time off, we just have to roll with it, right? Because people's health and things like that are more important than us putting out 5 videos a week. So, if it's a reduction in stuff we put out, so be it. It doesn't particularly bother me because, without the team, there's no content at all. So, obviously, the well-being of the team is of primary importance. Not sure these suggestions would probably pan out, though. What do you think, John?
Well, actually, your final comment there about the well-being of the team is most important is specifically one of the key reasons why folks like myself, Tom, Alex have stuck around for so long and have no plans to go anywhere. It's because you fostered a working environment that actually respects that, takes care of people. when we things are not always good, and sometimes you go through difficult stuff, and
Yeah, and it
it's
goes the other way as well. I've had issues, and you guys have stepped in to
absolutely.
help. It's been awesome.
And in an industry where there's just like layoffs happening everywhere, and people just like just overworking, all kinds of stuff happening, having a place that you feel that everybody can rely on one another, and also ready to help when somebody needs help at any point. That's priceless. That is so awesome, and that's one of the best things about it. So being able to do that is great. But yeah, I mean, you can't just can't just replace Alex. Alex is Alex, and it's not all the types of work that he could do. Many of us could do it, maybe not the same way, but we could do that kind of basic work for sure. The reason we don't is usually actually a matter of choice more than anything else, right? We tend to cover the types of things that we want to cover, which is another cool thing. But even if we do cover that stuff, like Alex has a unique voice. I mean, I think everybody has like a unique voice that makes their opinions interesting and worthwhile. So you can't replace it, right? Alex is Alex.
Yeah, the other thing about well-being is also about not making people do things they don't really want to do.
Right. Alex loves PC. He loves it.
Yeah.
The things he talks about, he's not doing that because that's the job. He's doing it because that's what he loves, and that's why he's good at it, right? That's the stuff that he would do in his free time anyway.
Okay. Oliver.
Yeah, this idea, interesting. I don't think it's a very good idea, just because I feel like PC content should not be this demanding in terms of workload. If we were doing this all on PC every week, then I don't think we get too much else done. And I think you can kind of get the results you want out of focusing on what's interesting about any given game, not basically treating every single game like a checklist of things you need to cover, because oftentimes maybe the visual comparisons aren't that interesting. Maybe the shader cache information isn't so necessary to know. Maybe it just, that are pre-compiled shaders at launch and it doesn't have any particular issues, or whatever the case may be. And also, like John said, I don't think that, speaking personally, I don't have interest in doing too much direct coverage of PC games. I've done it in the past, working with Alex in tandem. I've also done it once, I think, on like Final Fantasy VII Remake a long time ago. But I'm not really interested in doing direct coverage of PC games myself, because I don't think I would do that amazing of a job in some cases, and also because it's not really what I'm interested in, and I don't really think in terms of the needs that a dedicated PC player has. Whereas I think Alex, he goes through games and he really troubleshoots them in a way that actually isolates a lot of issues very quickly, which I always find very compelling with his coverage.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
I don't really think that this is such a good idea for everyone to just be doing PC coverage. And there's so much console coverage out there to do. Like, you'd be surprised. There's so many games. There's so much stuff to look at, that I think we're all hands on deck with that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think the other thing, of course, is basically it's all about identifying new talent and bringing them on board, whether it's to begin with via freelancing or moving on to like full-time hires, and then mentorship from the people that, from Alex, for example, if we brought on a new PC guy. I think that's kind of like the route forward. That's kind of the more sustainable route forward, as opposed to kind of mad scrambling about to delegate Alex's tasks to other members of the team. That's not really what I think we have in mind. Certainly an interesting question, though, because it is a very small team and we do a lot of work. And it's interesting that, what Oliver was talking about there's a lot of stuff that we spend time looking into, which ultimately ends up in something that's not particularly interesting and therefore doesn't really end up in content. So, for example, what's the point of doing like a full visual comparison breakdown of a game running on PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X when they look the same? You can obviously have to do the work to ascertain that they look the same, but you can't produce a video saying, oh yes, and the shadows are the same, and the draw distance is the same, and the texture quality is the same. It's just not particularly interesting. It's a one-sentence summary of like a whole lot of work. Yes, the games are visually identical. That's the sort of bottom line there. I'm moving off on a tangent though, so I hope that addressed that particular question. And that was the last question. So please do like, subscribe, share if you enjoyed the content. Ring bells for notifications for you, potential algorithmic boosts for us. Support us on Patreon, patreon.com/Digital Foundry. That's all from us for now. Thanks for watching. Except, in the background, while you guys have been talking, I have just been on Newegg and put together a PC build.
Whoa, okay.
I'm going to send some screenshots here to Oliver to include in the edit. But basically, Ryzen 5 5600, B550 based motherboard, power supply, storage, Radeon 9060 XT 16 gigabytes. So it's very similar in theory to the build that Mark Triforce Duddleson put together. Total 16 gigabytes of DDR4, by the way.
Okay.
The final price, $1,112.57. It's not bad.
Mm-hmm.
It's all right.
Is
Not
that with a
bad.
2
Not bad at
terabyte
all.
SSD as well?
It's a 1 terabyte SSD.
Oh, 1 terabyte. Okay.
Yeah, which I think is okay. It's sort of like the minimum, really, isn't it?
I think that's one of the areas where Sony is really eating it on PS5 Pro right
Yeah,
now. I would
yeah,
be surprised if they decrease it, actually. Like, I think that's an area
Yeah.
where they're just blowing an extra $100 odd they don't need to be blowing.
Anyway, that's that. Thanks as ever for watching and supporting Digital Foundry. We'll see you next week.